10 years down the road, what are your kind of predictions for how Bitcoin's going to change things or where Bitcoin's going to be? Now, normally when we get Bitcoiners on, for interviews, we ask them, their thoughts in 2022 or kind of like the more short to midterm. When we were talking off camera, you mentioned like a bigger picture outlook. So when I'm interested, 10 years down the road, what are your kind of predictions for how Bitcoin's going to change things or where Bitcoin's going to be?
Oof, good question. So I'll give you two things. So first of all, where we are in this cycle, right? I kind of view Bitcoin as having these 4-year cycles that are demarked by the halving, right? Nothing crazy there. I think what we saw for this past cycle was really interesting. I think that it was in a lot of ways a disappointing cycle for Bitcoin. We haven't seen that blow off top. We haven't seen the mania phase and all of that. I think there are two things that were different this time, and not in a way of like this time it's different, but in just kind of nuanced, sort of like random almost happenings. Number one was that in early 2021, like January, Elon Musk came out and threw his support behind Bitcoin. Tesla put it on the balance sheet. They accepted it for cars, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe that that kicked off a mini mania phase that really pulled interest forward from where everyone would have been getting in towards the top at the end of the year, where you would normally have that kind of cyclical top. Everyone instead piled in and speculated and got all excited in the beginning of the cycle. And so number one, I think that like kind of messed things up, and it's all Elon's fault, right? It changed fundamentally the way that the price cycle sort of looks. That's number one. Number two is that we had this supply chain dislocation for miners, and part of my thesis and our thesis about how the cycle works is that towards the top you start seeing a whole bunch of hash power come onto the market because the profitability of mining increases with the price. And that hash power piles on until eventually almost all miners are basically in the negative. At least way more than 50% of the miners are actually losing money when they have their machines on, at which point they all have to start A, selling their Bitcoins, and then B, eventually turning their miners off. And because of the supply chain dislocations, no miners were being delivered in this entire cycle until, let's say, 4 months ago. It was caused by COVID and all this kind of stuff, right? But it really has created this situation now where like the mining pressure has not come online yet. We're just kind of hitting all-time highs post China ban, and that's really just because like a lack of delivery of these new ASICs. So what that means is that like right now we're in this interesting moment where like macro is turning bearish, the legacy market's turning bearish. The Bitcoin price has like traded sideways, sort of, is starting to inch up, but we have this looming sell pressure coming from the miners that just hasn't hit yet. And so I see us in kind of the short term, let's say by the end of the year kind of window, where you could see another run up, you could see trading sideways, you could see kind of all sorts of things. It feels like chaos right now before we have that, kind of closing the door of the cycle, the miner, the hash power coming on and the sell pressure kind of coming on the market. So all of that is kind of how I'm seeing 2022. Now, if you're going to look at the next 10 years, I mean, our conference last year, as El Salvador announced Bitcoin as legal tender, right? Like that was a huge new chapter in the story of crypto broadly, and especially Bitcoin. I would say in the next 10 years, you're going to have a tension arise in the market between decentralized cryptos and your central bank digital currencies that are ultimately tools of surveillance and totalitarianism. I hope that doesn't sound like too extreme. I think it's fairly obvious if you look at how they function. And what's going to happen is that CBDCs are going to get phased into the market and make everyone very comfortable with the same interface that Bitcoin truly is, and it will narrow the number of barriers for people to enter into Bitcoin, and the number of kind of arenas by which Bitcoin is compared to a US dollar. No one will keep comparing it to cash because cash is going to get phased out whether we like it or not. So from that perspective, I think the narrative for the average person is going to become a lot stronger, and they're going to see a lot more incentives for them to actually park their money into Bitcoin. And so because of that, I see, the next decade as being this giant adoption curve of Bitcoin that, fundamentally changes the way society works. We'll leave it at that because, there's lots to unpack there.
Mm-hmm. So would like a continuation of things we've seen in the last couple of years where, big companies putting it on their balance sheet, small nations adopting it as their currency, different entities adopting it in their reserves. Would you think a continuation of this?
At the very minimum. I mean, I would expect that medium to large scale countries will be adopting Bitcoin in the next 10 years as legal tender. I see that as a natural result of the Chinese renminbi coming on to, basically compete with the US dollar as the world reserve currency. It will necessitate a neutral option. And I don't think you can call any other currency, scaled enough and neutral enough to compete in that arena. And so Bitcoin will have a crazy geopolitical role to play in the next 10 years. On top of that, I would say that companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet will only get them, so far, because they'll want liquidity on that Bitcoin in a way that's not, that's not just going to an exchange and selling it. So I would expect not only for it to join companies' balance sheets, but also for them to start denominating activity in Bitcoin, for you to be able to make purchases or them to be able to do sales in Bitcoin denominated terms, especially for, again, multinational corporations that are trying to navigate a trade situation that exists between two titans of global reserve currency competition. And so Bitcoin's going to be their only solution to not make sub one angry.
Mm-hmm. I think Bitcoin will be a unit of account eventually. I mean, it's a unit of account for many Bitcoiners, many people in crypto, but for like these bigger entities, these more legacy entities, you think it's going to be a unit of account within 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would call unit of account like on the spectrum. It's going to be hard to tell, and probably their tax status will kind of dictate ultimately how they're accounting for their Bitcoin. But I think that they will want to be kind of working as Bitcoin natively as possible so that they can just assuage both sides of whatever ultimately, like, I just see this as like a Cold War. And so it's like, if you want to be a company, let's take Apple for an example. I'm not saying Apple's going to adopt it in 10 years. I'd be surprised if they didn't. But, if they have all their manufacturing in China or a portion of their manufacturing in China, and they're also, selling to consumers and exist in the US, why wouldn't they be kind of using Bitcoin as this way of kind of conducting transactions so that neither China nor the US gets mad at them for like overvaluing one currency over the other, just based on kind of what their day-to-day operational needs are. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know if unit of account is going to be the exact kind of use case. I think you need far less volatility in the Bitcoin price for people to, for big, large scale things to use it as a unit of account.
Right.